Today we'll be discussing about an important topic, cholinergic system, from the topic of pharmacology, drugs acting on central nervous system. Right, so basically it is autonomic pharmacology, and this cholinergic system will help us to understand how drugs acting on autonomic nervous system works. Right, so before we begin, let us first understand the nervous system. So as we all know, the nervous system is divided into two parts. We have the central nervous system and we have the peripheral nervous system. Now in central nervous system, it contains brain and spinal cord. Right? While the peripheral nervous system, it can be further divided into two types. That is somatic nervous system and autonomic nervous system. Right? Now, what is autonomic nervous system? So autonomic nervous system, as we all know, that helps you to control your involuntary activities. Right? It helps to control involuntary activities. That is the activities which are not under our control. Let's say our heartbeat, our digestion. These are not controlled by us. On the other hand, we have somatic nervous system that controls all the voluntary actions, right? That controls all the voluntary actions of the body. Now, autonomic nervous system, autonomic actually comes from the word auto. Auto, that means self, right? And nomic means governing. So it is self-governing. It governs itself, right? So this is autonomic nervous system. Now, when we see the fibers of the autonomic nervous system, right? So each autonomic fiber is made up of two neurons. As you can see in the picture, this is one neuron. Then we have a ganglia, right? And after that, we have the second neuron, which are autonomic nervous system is actually made up of two neurons which are arranged in series, right? Now, the part which is before the ganglia, that is called as preganglionic fibers. The fibers are the part of the neuron that is before ganglia, that is called as preganglionic fibers. Then the part which is after the ganglion, it takes to the effector cell, right? So from the ganglion to the effector cell, it is called as postganglionic fibers, right? Now, as we can see, when the postganglionic fibers, it reaches to the effector cell, right? So between the effector cell and the end terminal of the ganglionic fiber, we have a junction, and that junction is called as neuromuscular junction, right? So it is actually the junction between the neuron and the effector, right? Effector cell. So that becomes neuromuscular junction. So basically, in autonomic nervous system, the fiber is made up of two neurons. It's very clear in the picture, right? On the other hand, when we come to somatic nervous system is made up of single motor neuron. As we all can see, right? It starts and it directly supplies. So there is no breakage, right? Or there is a single motor neuron which connects to the skeleton muscle, right? It supplies to the skeleton muscle. Now again, as you can see, there is a junction between the motor nerve and the skeleton muscle, and that junction we call it as neuromuscular junction, because it is the junction between the skeleton muscle and the neuron. So we call it as neuromuscular junction. While on the anatomic nervous system, it was called as neuroeffector junction, right? Yeah. Okay. Now let's see, what does they innervate? So autonomic nervous system, what does it innervates? Autonomic nervous system basically innervates your heart. It innervates the smooth muscles and exocrine gland. Okay. Exocrine glands. So now, since it innervates all the involuntary controlled parts of our body, right? Like the heart, smooth muscles, and exocrine gland. So what will it control? So it will, since it controls the heart, it will control circulation, right? All right. Now, since it controls the exocrine gland and the smooth muscles, it will control digestion as well as excretion, right? Digestion and excretion. All right. So let's revise again. So autonomic nervous system controls our involuntary actions, right? Actions which are not in our control. Now, it has a nerve fiber, that is two nerve fibers actually connect to make each autonomic fiber, right? So there are two, they are arranged in series. So first part, it is called as preganglionic fibers. After the ganglion, it is called as postganglionic fibers. Simple. Now it innervates heart, smooth muscles, and exocrine gland. What does it control? Since it will innervate the heart, right? So it will control circulation. It innervates smooth muscles and exocrine glands. So it will control digestion and excretion. As simple, right? On the other hand, this somatic nervous system, it innervates the skeletal muscles of our body, all right? It controls the skeletal muscles. Now, what are skeletal muscles? Are the muscles which are actually attached to the bone, right? Like our legs and hands. And what does it control? It controls skeletal tone. All right. So this is all about peripheral nervous system, right? Now, when we come to see the peripheral nervous system, it is again further subdivided into two types, right? Right. So now let's see the autonomic nervous system. So this autonomic nervous system actually is divided into two types. Autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system is being divided into two types. One is the sympathetic system, other is the parasympathetic system. Now, we already have a clear picture about what is autonomic nervous system. It controls involuntary action. It has fibers which are preganglionic and postganglionic, right? Now, autonomic nervous system is again divided into two types. That is sympathetic division and parasympathetic division, right? Now, the sympathetic division actually arises from thoracolumbar region, okay? Thoracolumbar region. That is, where is the thoracolumbar region present? It is present from T1 to L3, right? And since they originate from the thoracolumbar region, they are also called as thoracolumbar outflow, okay? And on the other hand, the origin of the parasympathetic system is actually on two types, right? It arises from two separate regions. There are two regions. All right. Now, the first region is actually the cranial outflow. And the next region is the sacral outflow, right? Sacral outflow. Now, this cranial region will actually have will actually be originating from the cranial nerves. So which are the cranial nerves it will originate from? It will originate from 3, 7, 9, and 10. Right? So these are the cranial nerves. So they are called as cranial outflow. Now, what is sacral outflow? Sacral outflow is when they arise from S2, S3, and S4 spinal roots. Okay, so there they are called as sacral outflow, right? So autonomic nervous system had two divisions, sympathetic, parasympathetic. Sympathetic arises from thoracolumbar region, that is T1 to L3. While the parasympathetic, it arises from two regions, right? The cranial outflow and the sacral outflow. Cranial outflow will have 3, 7, 9, and 10 cranial nerves involved. The sacral outflow will have S2, S3, and S4 spinal roots. Still here is clear? Okay. Now, as we have just seen here that the sympathetic system and the parasympathetic system both had something like preganglionic fibers and postganglionic fibers, right? So, the preganglionic fiber that are actually present in the sympathetic nervous system, they are shorter. Okay? So, they are short, while the postganglionic fibers, they are long. All right? Postganglionic fibers are long there. On the other hand, in preganglionic fibers of the parasympathetic, they are long, and postganglionic, they are short. All right, let's try to make a picture out of it and understand. So this, it originates, right? So it is short, it comes in the ganglion. And then the long one, finally, this is effector cell, right? Effector cell. On the other hand, this starts, this one is long, preganglionic is long, it relays on the ganglion, and then we have the shorter one that reaches the effector cell. Okay, so here this is preganglionic, this is postganglionic. Here this one is preganglionic, this is postganglionic. So we can clearly see, right? The preganglionic fiber, they are short, and here the preganglionic fiber are long. The postganglionic fiber, here they are long, while in parasympathetic, the postganglionic fibers are short. Easy till here? Okay, now let's see what does they innervate. So sympathetic system, what do they innervate? Where do they supply? So sympathetic system mostly supplies the sweat glands, hair follicles, spleen, and most of the blood vessels, right? All right. In the same way, this parasympathetic nervous system, what do they supply? They supply the ciliary muscles, that is muscles of the eyeball, ciliary muscles, and pancreatic and gastric glands. Pancreatic and gastric glands. Right? So they innervate the ciliary muscle and the pancreatic and gastric glands. Now they also innervate some of the important organs, that is the visceral organs. Sympathetic and parasympathetic, they also innervate few of the visceral organs like heart, right? Because they are controlling the involuntary action. So when they are actually controlling the visceral organ, they are supplied by both autonomic, they are supplied by both sympathetic as well as parasympathetic nervous system. So if we see here, this parasympathetic nervous system and sympathetic nervous system, both are supplying the heart, the pupil, the bronchi, and the GI, right? But both of them usually produces the opposite effect. Okay, that is, if the sympathetic nervous system, what does it do? It increases the heart rate and it increases the force of contraction on the heart. On the other hand, the parasympathetic nervous system, what does? It decreases the heart rate and decreases the force of contraction, right? So basically, sympathetic and parasympathetic, they produce opposite effect, all right? So if on the pupil, it is doing mydriasis, so the parasympathetic will do meiosis, right? If the sympathetic nervous system is doing bronchodilation, the other will do bronchospasm. If the sympathetic, its function is GI, it will decrease GI motility and sphincter tone increases. On the other hand, it increases mortality, right? And the sphincters are relaxed, right? So what did we see? That sympathetic and parasympathetic, they produce opposite effect, right? But usually any one of them is dominant, right? So that was all about sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. All right, till here? Okay, now let's move to cholinergic system actually. All right, so what is cholinergic system? So cholinergic system is actually, just imagine that we have the nervous system. Okay, let's say here is the nervous system. Nervous system, right? Now, from the nervous system, we have to send a message to the target organ, this target organ. Now, the messages are actually, they carry signals, right? They carry chemical signals. Now, this chemical signals is actually carried out by a neurotransmitter, right? Now, there are many neurotransmitters in our body. When this neurotransmitter is acetylcholine, this system is known as cholinergic system, right? So basically, this acetylcholine is the neurotransmitter of cholinergic system, right? So you understand what is cholinergic system? Cholinergic system is the system where the messages are transferred by the neurotransmitter that is called as acetylcholine. All right. Now let us actually try to understand what is cholinergic neurons, right? So when suppose I have a neuron that produces acetylcholine, right? So when it produces acetylcholine, right, it stores acetylcholine and it releases acetylcholine, right? So such neurons we will call it as cholinergic neurons. Okay, cholinergic neurons, right? Okay, so now let us see, try to understand the sites of cholinergic transmission. That is, at what all places this cholinergic transmission is actually happening. All right, so let's try to find it out. So first one, so as you can see, we have numbers labeled, right? So as you can see, the first one, right? The first one will be, it arises from sympathetic and parasympathetic, right? You can see that there are sympathetic as well as parasympathetic. Now, in sympathetic, we have preganglionic and postganglionic fibers. So see, just try to relate the number one, which is labeled 1, right? So one is preganglionic fibers of both sympathetic and parasympathetic system. Definitely, these are the preganglionic fibers of parasympathetic nervous system. This is the preganglionic fibers of sympathetic nervous system. So one is, I hope, clear, right? So one is the preganglionic fibers of both sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, right? So these are the site where actually cholinergic transmissions are taking place. So first site is clear. Let's see the next slide. So postganglionic fibers of parasympathetic system, right? On the parasympathetic system, you have the postganglionic fibers, right? So postganglionic fibers of the parasympathetic system. So easy, it's clear. Let's understand the third one. It is sympathetic postganglionic fibers supplying the sweat glands. So let us see sweat glands. So it is sympathetic, right? So sympathetic postganglionic. These are postganglionic fibers supplying the sweat gland. This is also clear. All right. Then we have nerve fibers supplying the adrenal medulla. Fourth one is the nerve fiber which is supplying the adrenal medulla. So from here, when it is supplying, there also acetylcholine transmission is actually taking place. All right. Then next we have is motor nerve. Right. So we all know what is a motor nerve. Just now we have learned, will the motor nerve will have any ganglion, preganglionic or postganglionic fiber? No, right? So we can see it is a straight one single neuron, right? A single fiber. So that is motor fiber. And the last one is postganglionic fibers of sympathetic system. So these are postganglionic fibers of sympathetic system, right? Little here. So these are actually the sites where cholinergic transmissions are taking place. All right. Let's move ahead. Now coming to synthesis of acetylcholine. Right? How is the acetylcholine formed? What is acetylcholine? Acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter that is used in the cholinergic system. Clear? All right. So let us see how is acetylcholine synthesized. So for that, there is choline which is actually present, right? So this choline, this choline enters the neuron by a carrier mediated transport, right? It will not enter by diffusion or passive transport, something like that, right? It has some carrier proteins like carrier mediated transport that takes this choline into the neurons. Okay. Now where when it enters this neuron, it reacts with acetylcholine. Can you see it is reacting with acetylcholine? This choline reacts with acetylcholine in the presence of choline is acetyltransferase. Okay, they react in the presence of this enzyme that is called as choline acetyltransferase. Okay, so choline, it enters the neurons where it mixes or where it reacts with acetyl coenzyme. There it forms ACH, that is acetyl coenzyme. Sorry, where it forms ACH, that is acetylcholine, right? Now this acetylcholine is stored in the vesicles. Here it is stored. All right, it is stored in a storage vesicles, right? Now then it is released. This acetylcholine is actually released in the synaptic cleft, right? When the potential reaches the nerve terminal, where there is an action potential, these acetylcholine, they start up and come into the synaptic cleft. All right, now in the synaptic cleft, it gets and attached to the effector sites and activates them. Okay, it goes and it just activates them. All right, right. Now in the synaptic cleft, when they are in the synaptic cleft right now, what happens? They are immediately hydrolyzed by an enzyme that is called as acetylcholinesterase. Okay, it is immediately, can you see they are immediately like attacking them, right? It is immediately attacking this acetylcholine. And what is the name of the enzyme that is actually attacking it? It is called as acetylcholinesterase enzyme, ACHE. All right, this enzyme actually starts to rapidly hydrolyze it. All right, till here, this is all about synthesis of acetylcholine, right? Now let us learn a bit more about cholinesterase. Cholinesterase is actually acetylcholinesterase enzyme, right? This enzyme which was actually destroying, right? It was destroying, or it was like rapidly hydrolyzing these. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so now cholinesterase enzyme, what it does, it rapidly hydrolyzes the acetylcholine to choline and acetic acid. Okay, it breaks into choline and acetic acid. All right, what it breaks, it breaks acetyl coenzyme, ACH. It breaks it, all right, into two parts, choline and acetic acid, right? Now this cholinesterase enzyme is actually of two types, okay? First is true cholinesterase, the other is pseudocholinesterase, right? The enzyme which was actually rapidly hydrolyzing this acetylcholine, it is of two types. First is true cholinesterase, the other is pseudocholinesterase. Now, true cholinesterase, as you can see, it is found in cholinergic neurons, ganglias, RBC, and neuromuscular junction. Okay, so where are they present? They're present on RBCs, neuromuscular junction, ganglions, and cholinergic. Right? Now, here the hydrolysis is really fast, okay, because it is true cholinesterase. So here the hydrolysis is really fast. All right, and it hydrolyzes acetyl coenzyme ACH, and there is one more enzyme that neurotransmitter like acetyl coenzyme, that is called as methacholine. Okay, right? Now let's see about this pseudocholinesterase. What it does, it is found in plasma, liver, right, and glial cells. Clear? Now its hydrolysis is not very fast, that is, it is slow, right? It hydrolyzes the acetyl coenzyme slow. And what all things it can hydrolyze? It can hydrolyze a wide variety of esters, okay, and ACH, acetyl coenzyme, but it cannot hydrolyze methacholine. Right? It cannot hydrolyze methacholine. So let's have cholinesterase is an enzyme that degrades acetylcholine into choline and acetic acid. There are two types. There are true acetylcholinesterase and pseudocholinesterase. Now, true acetylcholinesterase, they are found in cholinergic neurons, ganglions, and RPC. Its hydrolysis is fast and it hydrolyzes acetylcholine as well as methacholine. It can hydrolyze both of them, but pseudocholinesterase, it can only hydrolyze ester but not ester as well as acetylcholine, but it cannot hydrolyze methacholine. Okay, and here the hydrolysis is slow. Got it till here? Okay. Next we have is cholinergic receptors. Now, what are cholinergic receptors? You saw here there were receptors shown in green color, right? Where when actually it releases into the synaptic cleft and it goes and attacks to the receptors. So now these cholinergic receptors, they are actually broadly classified into two types. Okay. They are muscarinic receptors and nicotinic receptors. Okay. Now, muscarinic receptors, as you can see, they are again further classified into 5 types. That is M1, M2, M3, M4, and M5. Right? Now, only M1, M2, M3 are functionally recognized. Means you actually understand the function of it. But this M4 and N5, they are only found, we only know that they're found in the CNS, but actually the function is not well recognized. All right. Okay. Now, all these muscarinic receptors, they have a G protein coupled receptor with them. Okay. They have G protein coupled receptor is present with them, right? And they regulate the production of intracellular second messenger, all right? This muscarinic receptor. Now coming to nicotinic receptor. Now nicotinic receptors are also further classified into 2 types, N and NM, okay? Now, activation of these receptors, activation of these nicotinic receptor, they directly open up the ion channel. They open up ion channel opening, right? And they causes depolarization. It causes, as soon as there will be opening of the ion channel, it will lead to depolarization of the membrane, right? Okay. Now, so where are these nicotinic receptors? They are present in autonomic ganglions, adrenal medulla, CNS, and neuromuscular junctions. All right. So these are the places where they are present. So it's important for us to understand the places where they are present. Let's say if you can see M2 receptor, it is present only in the heart, right? So whenever I'm talking about heart, that means I'll be having the M2 receptor. Okay. Right. Now let's see. Some of the nicotinic and muscarinic receptors, their intracellular effect means what do they affect, right? When these acetylcholine comes and binds with this receptor, what are the response or what are the effects they are going to form? Okay, so first we have is M1 and M2 receptors. So what it does, it increases IP3 and DAG. Right? It increases the effect and they are present on M1 and M2. So this will increase the learning and memory, right? Because M1 is present in CNS. It promotes glandular secretion and smooth muscle contraction, right? Since it has gastric glands and N3 will have smooth muscles, right? So it will all promote, they are present on the gastric glands and the smooth muscles. So it will it will increase learning and memory, and it will also promote the glandular secretion and smooth muscle contraction, right? Okay, next we have is M2 receptors. M2 receptors are present on the heart, right? So it decreases cyclic adenosine monophosphate, CAMP. It decreases CAMP and it leads to opening of potassium channel. All right. Now, as the channel will get open, it will cause hyperpolarization. That is depression of SA node, depression of AV node, and decrease the arterial ventricular contraction, right? So this muscarinic receptors, as it will get the acetylcholine, right? So what will it do? It will do hyperpolarization. All right. Okay. Next we have is nicotinic receptors. Now there were two types of nicotinic receptors, right? N and NM, right? Now this nicotinic receptors already stated they cause opening of the ion channel, right? We have already learned here that they cause opening of the ion channel, and opening of the ion channel will lead to depolarization. So same here also, opening of the ion channel will cause depolarization. Now depolarization, it will cause skeletal muscle contraction, and here depolarization, it will cause release of adrenaline and non-adrenaline from adrenal medulla. Right. So this was a brief introduction before we jump into drugs acting on the CNS. Now, after having this much summary, we'll be easily able to understand. All right. So that's it. Thank you so much.